Welcome to today's webinar, Mobility and Exercise, Strategies to Keep Moving While Sheltering in Place, which so many of us are doing. Please note that all attendees are in listen-only mode and that this webinar is being recorded. I'm Lori Sjogren, Community Program and Services Director for the National Ataxia Foundation, and I'll be assisting with today's webinar along with our Communications Manager, Stephanie Lucas. Questions for the webinar speakers can be typed in the questions tab found in your control panel, and we will answer as many of your questions regarding this topic as time allows prior to the end time of today's session. So as we move along in the webinar and your questions arise, please submit those to us. The speakers for today's webinar will certainly provide us all with some great tips to get us moving during this time of social distancing. Jennifer Keller is a research physical therapist at the Kennedy Krager Institute, and Jennifer Millar is also a research physical therapist with the Johns Hopkins Laboratory of Vestibular Neuroadaptation and a member of the Johns Hopkins Ataxia Center team. And now I'd like to welcome Jen Millar to start us off with today's discussion. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for inviting Jen and I to participate in this webinar, and thank you all for tuning in. And we look forward to giving you some information that you hopefully can take and use to your advantage while you're sheltering in place. Just want to say we have the information that we give you is just some general ideas, but we want you to definitely seek out advice of your local PT or physician for more specific recommendations for exercises that are right for you and safe. And we have no financial relationships to disclose related to this presentation. So the objectives of this talk is we're going to discuss how to stay active while sheltering in place. We're going to discuss considerations for optimizing function and participation in your life activities. We're going to give you some specific examples of exercises you can do, with the caveat that you want to also follow up with your local PT. We're going to discuss safety and fall risk considerations, and then we'll also review how you can find a virtual PT near your home. So when we think of the effects of sheltering in place, we know you've all been told to stay at home. All your activities have been canceled. The things that you've signed up for to help yourself keep moving have kind of been squelched. So that can be a little source of frustration. Your lifestyle has maybe become a little more sedentary as a result, not the fault of your own. So your regular sources of activity and motivation have been altered. Your body might feel a little bit deconditioned as a result. Your balance might feel a little bit worse, or your walking might feel worse. And it's extra hard because you have to follow the guidelines of keeping that 6-foot distance from others too. So for people living with ataxia, there's just extra challenges to keep moving while sheltering in place and following the guidelines we're all asked to follow to stay virus-free. So we are going to discuss exercises you can consider doing at home to keep moving. But first, let's just briefly talk about some basic concepts to consider, starting off with the role of the cerebellum. There's the cerebellum. You all are probably familiar with it. Cerebellum is where movement, coordination, and motor learning occurs. And sensory input does provide feedback to the cerebellum, contributing to movement. The cerebellum itself does not produce a motor output itself. It just helps to modify the sensory inputs to make your movement smooth. Your balance and coordination relies on sensory inputs from your visual system, your vestibular balance system, your sensation, proprioceptive or balance system. And the cerebellum integrates that sensory feedback along with input from the cortex to predict a movement. So as I said, the cerebellum itself does not generate the motor output. The cerebellum just ensures that your movements are smooth and accurate. And then all voluntary movements in your body do rely on cerebellar functioning. And And when cerebellum isn't working 100%, your body also relies on your cognition to help you think about how to make your movements smooth and accurate. So some of those voluntary movements that rely on your cerebellum to work really well is your ocular motor function, allowing for stable gaze with head and body turns, or for your eyes to look at a target and not over or undershoot the target, or balance function required for walking, or coordination of movements of multiple joints. And if a certain part of the cerebellum isn't working 100%, you might have various symptoms. Not all of this, everybody has different types of symptoms, but one symptom could be blurry or blurry vision, or what's the fancy word for that is oscillopsia. So you could have blurry vision either with your head still or with your head or body moving. You could have imbalance or unsteadiness or difficulty appropriately anticipating or predicting movement, or inability or impaired ability to reach to a target accurately. One might tend to over or undershoot, or may take extra time to initiate or take longer time to complete a task. So the key point is the cerebellum relies on sensory feedback as well as cognitive input, otherwise, and as well as previous experiences for a proper movement to take place, and when it comes to addressing some of these symptoms. So the word ataxia can describe a symptom of movement and coordination. And for the purpose of this talk, we are going to discuss the management of limb ataxia and tips for optimizing movement. And there's many causes for ataxia symptoms. You can have a neurodegenerative cerebellar or sensory ataxia. You could have an autoimmune cause. You could have had a cerebral vascular accident or a stroke, traumatic brain injury, or a tumor. And as rehab therapists, we can refer to a model called the International Classification of Functioning Model, or ICF model, to help you problem solve how to optimize your function and participation in life. And this ICF model looks complex, but it's not really. On the top of this model lists your health condition, and in this case, we're listing ataxia. And below the health condition are factors of a person's overall function. So as therapists, we work to identify what variables are contributing to a person's overall function. And we might identify certain impairments on the exam, such as blurry or bouncy vision, imbalance or unsteadiness, coordination difficulties, overshooting or undershooting a target, variability of step placement. And then we may identify certain impairments on the exam as a result, like blurry or bouncy vision might lead to people having difficulty recognizing other spaces as you walk up to a person. You might experience veering with walking if your balance isn't 100%, or you might just experience a tremendous amount of fatigue just because it takes so much more effort to walk in a smooth manner. And even falling too can be a limitation, of course. And then these impairments might restrict a person's overall activity, including household, work, or community or life activities. And it can make it tough to get things done around your house or on your job. And then environmental factors, including how your home is set up, may impact your overall functional abilities, as well as personal factors such as motivation or social support. And then, of course, at this time of COVID-19, sheltering in place adds yet another variable for problem solving and optimizing your function and participation in home, school, or life activities. So we're going to discuss considerations for optimizing function and participation in daily activities. So this is a little question for everybody. So you can, little multiple choice question. Which skill do you think is a better predictor of walking speed? Is it more important for you to have optimal balance, or is your leg coordination ability more of a factor with how you do with walking? So what do you all think? Whoever answered A was correct, and this is based on a study done years ago by a group that from the lab where Jen Keller works. So now let's just talk about a study that was done in Germany several years ago. And the study was looking on the effects of intensive coordinated training, and was led by Winifred Ilg and her German colleagues on the effects of balance and coordination training in patients with various forms of hereditary and sensory degenerative ataxias. And in this study, participants could walk up to 10 meters with or without an assistive device. And outcome measures included clinical neurological scores like the SARA score, which is a valid measure for disease severity for spinocerebellar ataxias. And they also used quantitative motion analysis to capture quality of walking, as well as clinical outcome measures such as the dynamic gait index. And so we're going to just, there are 4 time points of when they collected data. They collected 2 baseline assessments, one time 2 months prior to the study, one time right before the study, and then one assessment immediately after 4 weeks of training, and another assessment 2 months after the end of the training. And each of those time points are represented by 1 bar here on the graph. And the results of the cerebellar ataxia patients showed improvement in their walking speed and their variability of steps and their body sway. So their quality of walking improved. Not only did their speed improve, but they were just walking more smoothly, and their dynamics balance improved to a level of clinical significance. And those cerebellar ataxia patients maintained those improvements. Now the people with the sensory ataxias, well, we'll talk about later, they did improve in their clinical neurological scores, but their walking and balance measures did not improve to a level of significance. So what was their workout? What did they do? The study had patients exercising for an hour in their lab or clinic 3 times per week, and then patients were asked to do exercises another hour per day at home for a total of 4 weeks. So that was up to 10 hours per week of training. And the exercises including standing balance tasks, dynamic balance tasks, whole body coordination, reactive training, and all those tasks challenged sensory systems required for motor learning, including visual, vestibular, and sensory systems. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Jen Keller, who we're really lucky to hear about her study that she did several years ago, which is really interesting and very relevant to everyone listening. So Jen, take it away.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, so to follow up from the study that Jen just told you about, we did something similar, but we did it as a home exercise program. So instead of being in person with the therapists in the gym, we taught people to do balance exercises, and we focused on balance exercises because, as Jen said, we had found previously in a study that it was balance that most impacted how people with ataxia were walking, more so than like where they could place their foot. And we studied 14 people, so you can see in the table, there were 14 people with ataxia who participated, and they were an average age of around 50 years, but they ranged from 35 to 75. They had a significant degree of ataxia, as you can see by their neurological scale rating, which is the ICARS there, which it's on a scale of 0 to 100, so 39 is pretty significant. And we had a mix of people who had both pure cerebellar ataxia, but like people in the previous study, also some people had sensory changes as well. We asked people to do balance exercises. They did 3 sitting and 3 standing exercises each, regardless of their ability. And we asked them to do them for 3 to 5 days a week for 20 minutes for 6 weeks. And halfway through, they came back and we modified their exercises if that was necessary. So we asked them to keep a log of how often they did their exercises and how hard they thought those exercises were. And you can see here that some people did the exercises more than we asked. So a minimum number of days would have been 15, and some didn't do them as much as we asked. And we also asked people to have an effort where they felt like it was about 50% effortful from like 40 to 60%. So half the time they could do the exercise without losing their balance, but the other half they struggled. And like the number of days that people exercised, you can also see that how much people challenged themselves varied. So, and this could have been for a lot of different reasons. You know, some people were very well-intentioned and did the exercises very frequently, but possibly they couldn't do it safely, which is one disadvantage to trying to do balance exercises at home, is that you really have to try and make it fit to what you're able to do. But as I said, what we were interested in looking at was that after people had practiced at their balance activities for the 6 weeks, we wanted to see if we made any change in their walking ability. So we measured different walking outcomes. On the next slide, what you're going to see is what we found was that people who performed challenging exercises are the ones that show the most change in their walking speed. So in this graph, you can I'm showing you that there's the rating of how challenging the exercises were, which is around the bottom of the x-axis, and on the y-axis is their change in walking speed. So typically when we walk, because I don't think we often think about walking in meters per second, but we usually walk at about 1.2 meters per second. So a change of 0.2 meters per second, which would be in about the middle of this graph, is pretty significant change over time. So from this study, we found that that the people who challenged themselves the most, around 50% or more, saw a significant change in their walking speed compared to those who were around, you know, a lower amount, like 20%. And you can see that from this study, basically, I think we often basically prescribe 20 minutes of exercise at least 4 times a week at a level that's challenging, but is able, or you're able to do it safely. Now, it's really interesting that both the previous study that Jen talked about and our home study showed an improvement in people's walking ability and from doing balance exercises. And the reason why I say why did this happen is because we also know that the cerebellum controls how we learn a new movement pattern or how we relearn a new movement pattern. And so when there's damage to the cerebellum, we can see that that some motor learning is impaired. And in particular, we think of it as adaptation learning is what we call it. But if you are to switch between 2 different types of mouse pads or computer mouse, you can find that it can be difficult to scale your movements appropriately. Like the first time you use a new computer, you know, the mouse just moves across the screen a lot more than you thought. And if you have to switch back and forth, say, between your home computer and your work computer, you'll find that can be challenging, particularly if you have an ataxia, because it might be hard to adapt your movements from one situation to the other, like we typically do. However, recently in our lab, we did a study looking at reinforcement feedback, and we found that reinforcement feedback is better preserved when there's cerebellar damage. And so reinforcement learning, one way we talk about it is it's learning some new skill. So like learning how to swing on a swing. And if you think about the first time somebody learns to swing on a swing, you can't really tell them how to coordinate their legs and their trunk and their arms. They need to explore and try things out. And when they're successful, that's how they they start to learn it, as opposed to, you can't really like tell someone, you know, move your legs just like this, or so you need to be able to have some variability in your movement. And so that's the other component to the reinforcement feedback, is that you need to be able to explore what's going on in order to know what's happening. So stay tuned. I think there'll be more along these lines as we move forward, trying to figure out how to best make our exercise interventions or activities for people with ataxia maybe harness this advantage or ability. And I think if you want to make changes to your life, it's really important to individualize them. So I'm going to hand the talk back to Jen so that she can go into that in a little bit more detail to tell you more about how we might be able to make your life easier.
Thanks, Jen. And as Jen said, indeed, the project's going on in the Kennedy Krieger Movement Analysis Lab to explore how motor learning can, using reinforcement feedback strategies, could to be translated to therapies is really exciting. It's really cool what you guys are all doing. So by now you've had some substantial data highlighting how balance training can improve your quality of walking and smoothness of movement. And shortly we will give you examples of how balance training, examples of balance training tasks you can do at home. Before we do that, just gonna kind of break down into 3 categories of ways you can think about how to make your life easier, and think within your locus of control. There's not a lot, you can't control everything about your ataxia symptoms, but within what you can control, think about, we're trying to help you think about ways you can, things you can change about yourself, about the strategy you use, and or about your environment. So so exercise is definitely a way you can change something about yourself. And we are really encouraging that you do reach out to a local neurophysical therapist to establish the appropriate custom home program for you. And as you've heard, there's quite a bit of evidence in the ataxia literature that highlights the importance of balance training to smooth out your walking and your movement. And just a note that the German coordinative training study that we mentioned earlier, kind of cool that they observed clinical neurological posture and gait score improvements up to 2 to 5 points. And this is relevant because the natural disease progression for degenerative cerebellar ataxia can be 0.6 to 2.5 points per year on that SARA scale, that clinical neurological scale, depending on the type of ataxia you might have. And this is based on natural history data. So therefore, patients who participated in that study gained back functional performance equivalent of 2 or more years of disease progression. So retention of retention of this clinical neurological improvement was experienced among the cerebellar ataxia patients, but not so much with people who had sensory impairments as well. And then most ataxia research studies that were summarized in a systematic review that we have here on the bottom corner of the screen, and it's in the reference section. There's quite a few studies. There's 17 highlighted in this systematic review. And most studies did want to prove a point. Many studies did have patients exercising quite a lot. I mean, as we saw with the German study, 1 hour per day, 10 hours per week. And Jen Keller's study that she just highlighted, they found that people doing at least 20 minutes 4 times a week at a level that was challenging, that was safe, made a difference. And the key take-home point from Jen's studies, she said, is that challenging your body, challenging your cerebellum is what is required for your body to make change. So even almost, still more info is needed, but you could almost say that that's almost even more important than frequency. So the bottom line is to work on your balance regularly. And based on the data that we've presented to you and how you respond to balance training, you can be the judge of what is the right amount of intensity and frequency for you to feel good. And of course, not every day will feel like a good day, so you might need to modify how you practice your balance tasks to ensure you're successful and safe. I'm just going to point out the photo of the gentleman on his hands and toes. His name is Tim Anderson, and he came up with the concepts of original strength. And he has some great ideas for restoring natural movement that, as he points out, can be lost as we age as a result of sitting at a desk 8 hours per day. And tasks he promotes include crawling, cross-body movements. That challenges one balance in unique ways to help you learn to anticipate movement and improve your ability to perform basic functional tasks such as standing up from a chair. And the other main category of things you can do to change yourself is endurance training. So we know when your body isn't moving as smoothly as you'd like, or has to work extra hard to appropriately move, there is an added expenditure. Your heart rate will naturally be higher when walking from point A to point B than someone without ataxia. And endurance training might be helpful to fight fatigue. And it can also help to ensure you have enough energy and strength to do your balance training tasks. And we know from other general studies in the general population that aerobic exercise can also help boost your thinking and cognition skills, which we know you need for navigating around your day as well. And during this time of social distancing, when gyms are closed, it might be difficult to include the endurance training piece into your day. Not everybody has a stationary bike or a recumbent trike at home. So yet perhaps you can make a concerted effort to walk more around your home, or try even going outside, or try doing a few consecutive sit to stand transfers with the goal of not falling backward into the chair. And I will say, if you're able to safely try the crawling that was in that previous slide, even hands and toe crawling, if you're really advanced, you're going to feel that endurance training. That'll be that challenge. That would be good. And then just for those who have known cardiomyopathy, which is unfortunately can be one of the challenges of living with Friedreich's ataxia, do consult your provider for safe exercise guidelines that are right for you. In general, you should not exercise to the point of total exertion or exhaustion, nor should you feel symptoms of jaw pain or chest pain or increased leg swelling. So let symptoms be your guide and do what's right for you to optimize your energy. And then more sleep research is needed on the relationship between function and sleep in the ataxia population. Yet in the general population, it's known that people who are more active during the day can have improved sleep, quality of sleep at night. And alternatively, people who don't sleep well at night can be less active during the day. So if you're having issues with quality of sleep, then perhaps boosting your activity during the day might be of help. Along with the conservative measures such as ensuring adequate nutrition, hydration, and not overdoing it. And if you're still experiencing sleep issues, despite your conservative efforts, do reach out to your physician for maybe some additional medical management strategies. So again, endurance is super important because it'll help you fight fatigue. It'll boost your stamina, allowing you to get through those balance training tasks and other exercises, and it'll even help with your thinking skills and quality of sleep. So what we know doesn't work is Amy Bastian's group published a study, which Jen works with, demonstrating limb weighting creates added inertial forces that can be harder to control your movement. So in general, slowing down your movement is more important than limb weighting and can be a strategy to help you function better. And do feel free to use limb weights just for basic strength training. That's totally fine. But indeed, limb weighting might not help you with your walking. But what we know does work, some balance training exercises. Routine balance, as you heard, may enhance your ability to predict optimal movement to reinforce motor learning strategies you develop through practice. And motor learning is possible with a certain certain amount of motor exploration and practice. And changing the balance task might give your brain and body the opportunity to enhance available sensory systems to make your movement smoother. And we'll give you some more specific examples in another slide here with some videos. But I just wanted to emphasize the importance of making small changes when you're going to kind of progress along with as you're feeling like you're mastering a certain task. So this is an example. You might be standing in the corner of a room starting with your feet a little bit apart, and after you've done that for maybe a minute or 30 seconds several times successfully without grabbing the wall, the progression would be to then change your foot position. So just 1 inch only. So that would be starting with your feet apart and then moving together. And of course, you're the judge of where your starting point will be. And as Jen says, you can use that self-challenge scale to determine if you are challenging yourself at the right amount, but not too challenging where you're falling to the wall. So if you can do that, stand with your feet together without touching the wall, you can progress to having 1 less inch overlap. And if you can do that after several trials successfully, you can decrease the overlap another inch and so on. So again, super small incremental changes for self-progression. Very subtle movements. Okay. Oh, and then if you put your foot if you have one foot that feels a little less coordinated than the other, if you put the less coordinated foot behind, that's going to give you a little added challenge as well. Now we're going to just show you some sample videos. This is an example of something you can do. It's sitting at the edge of the bed in the morning. And you can just try alternating hand to opposite knee taps. And to make it harder, you can try this with your back unsupported. And you can also do this while reaching your arm up over your head and focus on your hand with your eye and track your eye down to your knee to make it a little bit harder. And then not everybody can get down onto the floor. If you were to get down to the floor, I'm kind of demonstrating how you can kind of kneel down and then eventually kind of crawl onto your back. But feel free to do some of these exercises I'm going to show you just laying in your bed. And if you're worried about waking up your spouse, you can go to another room and try these on a guest bed in your house or something like that. The first exercise is just picking one leg up and place it on the floor, pretending you have an egg underneath your foot. You don't want to crush the egg. And you can try this for a minute or a minute and a half. As long as you can do it with good control, as soon as you start losing your control, you can stop and take a break. And you can progress this by adding alternating arm movement. And you should focus on your movements being slow, controlled, follow your movement is key. You could also do what's called bent knee fallouts. You don't want to bring out your leg too far out, but you're just bringing it out halfway while keeping your pelvis still. And you're just kind of working on moving one leg outward at a time. If that's too easy, you can progress into a bridge where you lift up your hips and do the same movement where you're just bringing, you can either do alternating leg elevation. Again, you want to pretend you're not going to crush that egg. If that's too hard, you can back off and do alternating heel raises while maintaining the bridge. Or you can do the bent knee fallouts. Again, just focus on what you're able to do and then set a goal to work to the progression eventually. All right. And then here's some exercises you can do with the help of a foam roller, which we'll demonstrate. And this is something not everybody has, but it's a nice thing that you can you can work on foam roller exercises. This is a half round foam roller. It's 36 inches long by 6 inches in diameter and by 3 inches, and that's a full round roller. So either one would work. You can lay on the foam roller with the flat side down, which is easier with the round side up, or if the you can flip it around and have the flat side up, round side down. Round side down is harder. So the nice thing about the foam roller is you can work on challenging your balance, yet you're low to the ground. So the first challenge here is, can you lay on the foam roller and not fall off? So ideally, you're not holding on with your hands, but your hands are hovering just in case you need extra support. And then the progression is to try a little bit of either arm movement. And if you can do that, or you can just try heel raises. So just try one task at a time. Or you combine the progression, then would be combine the two. So you're constantly assessing what you're able to do, and then, you know, this is another task. You can just alternately raise one foot up and then lower without crushing the egg. But again, you be the judge of what's realistic for you. We want the exercise to be safe but doable. All right. Hang on. And all right, and then we're just going to show you some exercises that you can do in standing. And by doing this in the corner, this will be safe. But again, these standing balance exercises will set you up for success for walking. And again, yeah, keep in mind the corner is a safe place because you can have a wall on either side of you and behind you. So that way, if you were to fall, the wall will catch you. And you can place your walker in front of you or a chair, or have a care partner standing next to you just to be safe. And then the first thing is to judge how hard is it for you to stand. If you're standing with your feet super wide and it feels very easy, then try bring your feet a little bit closer, or even have your feet totally together. You might want to be at a level where the task feels challenging but safe. So on a 0 to 10 scale, 0 being you feel totally confident, super easy, and 10 being super hard, or you feel like you're falling, you want to work at a level 7 challenge. So you decide what that level is. And when you find that position that feels challenging but safe, cross your arms and hold your balance as best as you can without touching the wall. And then take a break and then try it again. And then if it becomes too easy, you can change your foot position just an inch only, as we showed in that previous slide. And then try holding your balance again without touching the wall. Another exercise you can do is to use a stool or a foam block. Place it in your foot on the box or stool or phone book and try to stand there for 30 seconds or 45. Just see what you can do, or a minute. You can do this with your arms at your side or crossed. And if it's easier if your feet are apart, harder if your feet are together. Again, you be the judge as to what is the right level of challenge for you. Another way you can use the stool box is to practice shifting your weight and tapping your foot on the box and then bringing your foot back down. And again, the most important thing is to remember to try to do slow and controlled movement, and we want you to be successful and safe. Another exercise you can do is simply weight shift one side, hold, and then come back to the other side. And what's not shown here is another important exercise, which is weight shifting backwards through your heels, holding for like 5 seconds, and then coming back and then repeating. And then if you can't put your foot on the box, you can simply just practice stepping forward, stepping backward. Just, again, constantly assessing what you're able to do. You just want to emphasize the importance of practicing squatting. It's a functional task that will help with your ability to go from sitting to standing without falling backwards and vice versa. So you want to set up yourself for success by having a chair or bed behind you. And if you want to put a chair in front of you, that's fine too. You're going to try to keep your hips way far back and your head up, arms forward. Hold for about 5 to 10 seconds and then return to standing, doing your best not to fall backwards. And then repeat. And again, if you feel like you need to use a little arm support first as you're first practicing this, that's totally appropriate. And eventually try to do this without using your arms. So again, this is a great functional task. It could be considered an endurance task. And all these exercises are just examples and not necessarily appropriate for everybody. So and to see benefit, as Jen shown in her study, the key is to challenge yourself. And we also want to make sure you have guidance in determining the right exercises for you that are challenging, but yet that you can do safely and independently. Okay, so just here's a little slide of some sample exercises you could do at home while sheltering in place, with the caveat, this isn't, not everybody listening this is appropriate for, but these are just some ideas. So based on the videos you saw, like first thing in the morning, you could do 10 minutes worth of exercises, and you could try some bed exercises as the video showed, the alternating leg elevation, the bridge, You could do the seated hand to opposite knee taps on the edge of your bed. You could do a progression of where you reach your arm up over your head and you look at your hand with your eyes, and then as you move your hand down to your knee, you're keeping your eyes on your hand, and that just adds just another layer of difficulty. You could do a couple standing balance tasks in the corner, and we gave you a bunch of ideas. So you can choose what's right and doable for you. And then the afternoon or evening, you could try maybe 10 squats over your chair or with the bed behind. And again, try to stand up without falling backward. And you be the judge of what's right for you. Might need to use a little bit of support initially. And then you could do another couple balance tasks in standing. You could do the one where you're stepping forward, stepping backward. Or that one where I was verbally describing, stand in the corner and then try to shift your weight back through your heels. Hold, just move at the level of your ankles, hold 5 seconds, and then come back to the center. Or you could try some basic crawling, getting on your hands and knees. Oh, and actually, I think here I have you on your hands and knees, and then you can do opposite arm elevation or alternating leg elevation. So just raise one arm at a time. Do that for a set of 30 seconds. Stop, and then just do leg elevation, one leg at a time. And then you can practice. If this is not for everybody, not everyone can get on the floor and do hands and crawling on your hands and knees. But boy, is it a good coordination workout. And the key is when you're crawling to move your opposite arm and leg in sync. So it puts an added layer of coordination challenge. So, and we recognize that some of the suggestions that are offered here, they're not exciting, they're not so fun. Although some people find them able to, you know, some people do have are very good and do keep doing them because they feel better and they do better. But these are some ideas of things you can do as an alternative to help you keep moving and to sustain a home program. And I'm going to turn the baton back over to Jen Keller, or just even ask Jen kind of to tell us how she found Tai Chi to be helpful for her patients.
Oh, thanks, Jen. I have recently trained with this Tai Chi Health program, which is done by Trisha Yu in Wisconsin, and they have designed this great Tai Chi program for people with any ability. They have a seated program as well as a standing program, as well as one where if you need to use an assistive device such as a walker or a cane or just a chair for a little extra balance, you can do it. I find the advantage to it is that you can do it by watching a video in your home, which at this point in time would be especially beneficial. If you go to her website, she has some short videos that you can start to learn. But the nice thing about learning from this program is that you can watch straight ahead. So traditional Tai Chi form requires a lot of turning and some one-legged standing activities, and sometimes instructors aren't good at making those modifications for you, but this program gives you a lot of different suggestions and abilities. You can also look on the website for people who are trained in the program that might offer classes to take. It's very beneficial because it works, it's been shown to decrease falls in a lot of different populations. It works on your balance and on strengthening and on very good alignment. And I think as well, it also has a component of mindfulness to it, which can help a lot with relaxation and learning how to use the muscles that you need to use, but not overusing extra muscles. So not getting those shoulders up at your ears, you know, when you don't really need to use your shoulders to try and stand on one foot or something like that. So I think I would encourage people to take a look at Tai Chi as an option to incorporate more balance activities into your life in a less rehab specific manner. Thanks, Jen.
Okay, thank you, Jen. And just mentioning also Pilates or yoga can be helpful. And while there's not any classes happening right now, those are just some options to keep in mind for the future. And I'm just mentioning Xbox Connect. It's just here because that same German group who established positive effects of intensive coordination training found that kids who practice full body coordination balance training using the video game Xbox Connect experienced similar clinical neurological improvement and quality walking outcomes as the adults in the original exercise study. And also what was fun is that as the kids kept practicing, their game scores improved over time and they were motivated to keep practicing. Unfortunately, Xbox Connect is not being manufactured anymore, but it can be found online in places like eBay. And then the games that they used in that study here are listed. And then swimming can be a great alternative exercise to challenge oneself. You can do things in the pool that you wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable trying on land without as much of a fear of a consequence of a fall. Certainly when this pandemic is more controlled and the pools begin to reopen, you can consider tapping into this resource if it's available to you and if you haven't already. And you can even consider even working with a personal trainer. And then just, you know, in the theme of keeping track of kind of what you are doing kind of during the day or over your week, it might help be a source of motivation to keep you moving. And you could do that various ways. You could write a daily activity journal, or you could even in that journal set up some basic goals. There's step trackers that are out there, activity monitors. Not everybody likes to be connected to the internet. So there's different just watch versions, or you could go Gucci and get yourself an Apple Watch, which has some other great features that we'll talk about later to help set goals and track activity. And then at the most basic level, many people do have iPhones, and there is a built-in app that's standard for all iPhones that you can look at if you haven't discovered that already. And the goal again of these activity tracking options is to kind of first assess what you're able to do with the help of that activity tracker, and then set a goal. For example, Jen gives this as a good example of increasing your current walking distance by 10%. Again, if you were to look on your iPhone, that's what the app looks like. And then if you click on activity, you can get your activity for the day, the week, the month, or the year. And then you can also click on summary, and they can see what you've done over the week. Or but the most important thing is the problem with the phone is if it's not on you, it's not really tracking your activity. So, but if you're going out of your house, certainly this could be very helpful. Right, and then in terms of the category of what can you change about your strategies and how you navigate to make your life easier. And Jen gives this great example of just slowing down your movement. Allows your brain to have a better sense of where your limb is in space relative to where you started. So just moving more slowly is a great strategy, as well as simplifying your movements. We know with ataxia and moving at multiple joints, that can make movements very complicated. So you can even do a compensation, like when you're trying to drink from your cup, put your elbow on the table to stabilize at one joint to minimize the complexity of moving at multiple joints. Or upon standing, take a second to ensure you're stable first. And then once you're stable and you're sure you're not going to fall backwards, then take a step. And then consider just doing one thing at a time. As we talked about earlier, if your cerebellum's not working optimally to integrate sensory information to generate a movement, then you have to rely on your cognition and your thought processes to execute a smooth movement. So just keep it simple and just focus on your movement task. And most of you know this about yourself, kind of better when you just focus on the task at hand. And so if you are walking and someone asks you a question, be okay with just stopping and then responding. Don't feel like you have to walk and talk. And then give yourself permission to accept help. Let someone else take the hot dish out of the oven. Don't feel like you need to do that yourself. And then we're going to just talk about things of in terms of what you can do to think about to change about your environment to make it your environment safe for you. And that's where we'll encourage you to work with a PT to maybe determine an appropriate walking device that might be helpful to manage your risk for falls. Not that you'd have to use the walking device all the time, but it's something to have for situations that involve tougher circumstances. And there's a lot of different devices out there on the market. And these are just some ideas. One of our Ataxia patients clued me into the life glider, and Jen Keller is a fan of this type of walker where it's open in the front, so your legs kind of have freedom to move wherever. And this life glider actually is unique in that it has a little bicycle seat on it also, and a seat belt. Jen pointed out the Trionic walker, which allows you to kind of go around outdoor and uneven terrain. The Nitro walker is something we've seen a lot at the Ataxia meetings. It's nice because the cables for the brakes are inside the walker, and it's light and portable. And then the U-step walker on the top right, that's a heavier walker, so people feel like they need more stability. That could be an option. And then a lot of people have heard of the up walker, which allows you to have arm support when you're in standing. And so again, lots of options, and good to work with a PD to help explore those options. And then in terms of making your home a safe environment, choose a chair you'll know you'll be able to get out of. Like, don't choose to sit in a low, soft, cushy couch that you're not going to be able to get out of. Consider sitting in a chair that's higher up with solid armor. You can assess for fall hazards such as removing area rugs, clearing power cords, using night lights, or consider working with a contractor to install handrails or grab bars. And then in this day and age, and now you have time at home, shelter in place, you can kind of be creative of how to make your home, tap into other resources like home technology. One of the people in our Ataxia community in Baltimore, her husband gave her some birthday money and she spent it on buying herself a Roomba, and she said that was the best purchase ever. She's super excited to have that at home, the remote vacuum. Smart lighting options are available. Not everyone likes to be connected to the internet, so you can do motion sensor lighting, but the smart lighting that is connected to the internet's kind of cool. That's an option. And then just, consider figuring out a fall safety plan. The plan, of course, is to not fall. And that's why we want to do our exercises and stay active. But God forbid you do fall, you want to make sure that you have a plan in place. So there's devices that you can have to call for help if needed. That Apple Watch, which again can be a little pricey, has a nice feature that if you do fall, it'll kind of send an alert and you can respond if you need help or not. And it can directly call 911 or some emergency contacts you program into your watch. If you do fall, not everybody listening has the skills to be able to get directly up off the floor. So this is just some steps to modify how you get up off the floor. First, just crawl to a stable chair, and then you can crawl up onto it with your arms. And then you can get your one foot out from underneath you, and then you can push up and just into transfer into the chair, and then kind of just rest. And then when you're ready, you can stand from the chair. Also, during this time of social, sheltering in place, you can think about what are your goals. And when it comes to sustaining activity, it's always good to have a goal in mind or something on your calendar you want to do, or just something to work towards. So examples might be you want to be able to navigate around your home or your community without falling, or be able to negotiate up and down steps or curves or hills safely, or to improve your energy level to endure a full day of work, or to walk more smoothly, which is what we talked about before. So it's important that you, when working with your therapist, that you have communicated your goals to your therapist. You're all on the same page, and you've communicated what is the most important activity you want to be able to keep doing and what you hope to get out of rehab. And how can you be ready to address your goals? You can break your goals down into smaller goals. For example, set a goal that small goal of increasing your walking distance ability by 10%, or time, or and be okay with modifying your expectations. Give yourself permission to do tasks slightly differently. We call that modified independence sometimes, where you do things a little bit roundabout way, but still get the task done. And then it's important to make sure that in whatever task you're working on, that you're considering your safety and addressing risk for falls. So how can you find a virtual physical therapist with the times we're in where most rehab clinics are not seeing patients in person? Some are, but you can go to the website apta.org, and the website has a link on the very top called Find a PT. You can select that link, and then you can select Neuro Rehab Specialist, enter your zip code, and then you can view the listings of therapists that specialize in neuro rehab near you. Not all therapists are registered on this website, so sometimes your physician might have a name or a recommendation for you as well. And then other rehab resources, we've talked a lot about PT related things, a few OT things, but if one of your priorities is figuring out how to better get, figure out strategies for managing just daily activities like bathing, dressing, eating, how to be able to keep working, or even work on problem solving for appropriate adaptive equipment recommendations. OT is an available resource. That's their general website. They don't have a Find an OT link similar to the PT group, but again, maybe your physician might have a recommendation for you. Same with speech pathology. If you have issues with speech, swallowing, cognition, executive function, that's another wonderful resource. So the key takeaways is we want you to keep moving. Don't stop, keep moving. Set realistic goals. Be safe, especially when exercising and when strategizing how to navigate in and around your home and when you're out of your home. And that includes wearing a mask in these times. And set yourself up for success. We want to thank you all for tuning in today. We've learned from all of you over the years, so thank you. And we also want to thank the anonymous donor from the Baltimore Ataxia community who funded the exercise video. And we very much want to thank the Ataxia Foundation for organizing this talk, especially Lori. And we want to thank the Johns Hopkins Ataxia Center, which is supported by the Macklin Foundation and others, as well as the Center for Movement Studies at the Kennedy Krieger Institute. And now we'll take some questions from the audience. If you have any questions, you can enter them in the chat box. I'll let Lori and Jen lead the question answers from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. That was really good. I've been looking at the questions on the box that people have typed in, and we had a few questions that were sent to us ahead of time. So for one thing, a couple of people asked about the information for the iPhone, and or to repeat it, I would say we actually are recording this whole talk, and it'll be available to you on the National Ataxia Foundation website. So you can always go back and hear it again, or look at some things that you're specific if we don't get to everything now in the questions. Also, I think you should stay tuned, because I believe Amanda from the Hopkins Ataxia Center is going to be talking about speech coming soon in the next few weeks or so. And so she can address some of the questions that in particular about speech. One question about speech that people had was whether or not their trouble with their speech could be related to their ataxia. And I think Jen and I can speak a little bit to that, in the fact that speech is motor control, and so it is also controlling movement of your mouth and your tongue, just similarly to controlling movement of your limbs or your balance. So yes, it's impacted by ataxia significantly for a lot of people. It can affect the smoothness of your speech, and also how clear your speech is. So and there are a lot of strategies that speech therapy can offer for that. And there's also a lot of assistive technology available as well to help manage the situation at this time. So I also saw that someone suggested after I had talked about Tai Chi that there's an adaptive yoga program offered by Adaptive Yoga Northwest right now that a number of people in an ataxia support group are attending. So I recommend you can check that out too. Maybe that's a good solution. Jen, you didn't talk at all about this time sailing, but one of our friends emailed me during your talk and mentioned that they have now have kayaks and that really challenges their balance. But maybe you could talk a little bit about your sailing that you do for people as well.
Sure, yeah. I'm part of I'm a volunteer at the Baltimore Downtown Sailing Center, where every June for 4 years now, we've had an Ataxia Sailing Day. Each year we get about ranging like 30 to 40 patients and families coming just for just time to have fun with each other, leave walkers and wheelchairs on the dock. And sailing is just a wonderful way to kind of, again, enjoy the outdoors, but it's kind of a therapy in itself because you, when it comes to steering the boat, you're getting immediate feedback, whether you're sailing in a straight line or not. So it's great therapy on the water. And you don't even know you're it's not even, you're not even aware you're having a workout too. But the boats we use are all stable. We have little, we have 23-foot keel boats, and we have some access dinghies. So everybody is set up, to be in a safe, to be safe. The boats are non-capsizable, and we even have lifts to get people in and out of the boat if they can't navigate getting in and out of the boat by themselves. So we'll see if we, and we will, so I don't know what we're doing this year given the COVID-19, but we'll certainly be doing that in the future at some point. And everybody listening are invited.
That's good. Thanks. So there were a number of questions just about general for exercise. So someone wants to know what your 2 best exercises are for ataxia. If you were to have 2, Jen, what would you say they are?
Well, not everybody can get on their hands and knees and on the floor, but I must admit, hands and the crawling forward and back on the hands and knees is one I like, because you're working your core, you're working on your endurance, you're working on your balance, and then the challenge of moving your limbs in sync just adds another layer of challenge. And then I'm always a fan of standing in the corner and just standing with your feet together, feet slightly overlapped. You get a lot out of that one.
Good. I also think, because we had a couple of questions about people who aren't walking, what they can do. I think sitting balance exercises are really important just as well. And we even had a few people who weren't in our study, but at the same time exercising along with the program, who did only sitting exercises and sitting balance exercises, and saw a number of improvements, including just in their standing ability. So for, showering or transferring, things like that, that also improved. There were some other questions too about, basically I would send them up as secondary complications. So someone asked if having a stiff neck could be a problem with ataxia, having tight hip flexors, and maybe some other things. I guess dizziness isn't necessarily a secondary one, but that was another impairment that people were interested in more about. So I think, go ahead. I was just going to say, one thing I think we didn't talk about is I think people use a lot more muscle activity to do stuff that we kind of call it co-contracting. So when you try and stand up, you're using both your quadriceps and your hamstrings, even though you don't need them both in full force, but it's kind of like you don't know what to use, so you overuse everything just in case. I think that can lead to fatigue, but it can also lead to what we would call a secondary symptom. So, tightness, short hamstrings, because you are activating both at the same time. So I think that's one way that can happen. And those are things that you can actually fix, reasonably well, because they're not a result directly of any disorder, but there are things that you can just learn how to do something differently, and that can make a big difference. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I would agree with you. In terms of sometimes neck being stiff and or dizzy, that can be a secondary effect of the blurry or bouncy vision, and that you're trying to compensate. Sometimes, not everybody, but some people, when they turn their head or body quickly, their vision is a little blurry, so they compensate by, as you said, Jen, stabilizing at the neck, and then that ends up overworking the neck muscles, or you might feel symptoms of dizziness when you turn your head or body quickly. Strategies of slowing down your movement, and as you said, Jen, trying to develop other strategies to soften the neck muscles and let your source of stability come from your core could be a way to kind of work around that a little bit. And then tight hip flexors, that is a modern human problem. Everyone in this world have tight hip flexors. We're all sitting at desks, in cars, commuting, or whatever. So,
we're sitting at your computer flat now, doing Zoom and web go-to meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
So one remedy for that is, like, first thing when you wake up in the morning, just lay in bed with your legs totally straightened out, and just let your body just kind of be laying in a flattened position. And you can, just give your legs a chance to stretch out and get in a neutral position, since you might be spending a lot of, especially while we're sheltering in place, more time in the chair than you want to be. So.
And could you speak a little bit to fatigue? People have had a couple of questions about fatigue, exercise and fatigue related to ataxia.
Yeah, as you said, Jen, when you're dealing with multiple, moving at multiple joints, and with ataxia, producing smooth movements takes a lot more energy and work. So fatigue can be a secondary effect. And then to manage that, that's where we really encourage the endurance training, because we don't want fatigue to be a barrier for you and from being able to do your home exercise program. So endurance exercise can somewhat help fight that.
Someone just asked a little bit, how do you feel about treadmills? There's not much more.
I think treadmill walking can be good. Sometimes, for the endurance part of it, I think they're wonderful. And then you want to balance out spending time doing those balance exercises as well, in whatever way you can, sitting or standing. Because with the treadmill, if you're holding on, you kind of miss that kind of opportunity to figure out how to be upright when you're walking without holding on. But of course, we want you to be safe. So it's kind of a trade-off.
Yeah, I think if you want it for just cardiovascular, then holding on is not a problem, right? So I think and also I think with you're going to experience fatigue no matter what with exercise. So I think all of us experience fatigue, and I have to laugh, but we do a strength training program that in a study recently, and I had people start, and the first few weeks they thought it was so hard, and then a few weeks later they thought it was still hard, and then at the end they still thought it was hard, and they kept saying, I thought it was going to get easier. And I was like, well, no, we have to keep making it harder in order for you to keep getting stronger. And so I think, part of having fatigue, yes, of course it's going to happen because you're moving, is uncoordinated, and it's much more difficult to move in those conditions. But addition to that, I think you start doing more, the better you feel and your expectations grow. So I would say using that iPhone app for one thing to see if maybe you're slowly increasing your overall activity over time, and that you could attribute to it. I also think I don't necessarily rely on a lot of like wanting people to, always write down for a long time how much, how fatigued they are or how, effortful things are, but it might be worth doing it for a week or two just to get an idea of, maybe, how fatigued do you feel, maybe relate it to how much sleep you've been getting and those kinds of things, just to get a better picture, and then take that to your therapist or your physician to see if they can have some suggestions. One thing we find with looking at people using accelerometers, which is what's in your phone to measure your activity, is that a low point for people can be that 4 to 6 o'clock time during the day. And so you might consider spacing out your activity so you do a little bit more during that time and maybe a little less earlier in the morning or something, to see if you can do that. The other thing that can sometimes help with feeling fatigued is actually exercise. So if that 4 to 6 o'clock window is when you start to feel, like you're winding down for the day, maybe you try and target your exercise, if you can, to coming around 3 o'clock, because people tend to get a little bit of a boost from the from having exercised about an hour later. So that's kind of that might be one option of something to try. And then let's see, people also asked about, and I'm going to lump them all together, but like what happens if they aren't seeing the changes that they want to see? And do they need to see someone who specifically knows about ataxia, a physical therapist that knows specifically about ataxia?
One little comment there is that like the tracking of your activity, setting realistic goals and constantly reassessing what you're able to do and then making adjustments to those goals can be helpful, because like when you're a kid and training for sports or something and you just never felt like you're at where you wanted to be, even though like you might have been developing skills or being able to do more over time. Like it's a process, and like, so you have to be good to yourself and just, again, accepting what your body's able to do and work within your abilities, but then make those goals of trying to, those small realistic goals and kind of keep chipping away at them. And we know with learning and with cerebellar ataxia and other ataxias, it just takes so much longer. I mean, we know you can get better, but it just, you have to give yourself permission to like just, it's, keep practicing, and it is a little bit of test of your frustration tolerance if you're not seeing the results you want immediately, but it's important to keep at it. And sometimes just maintaining your ability, we consider that successful too. Again, the goal is to just kind of stay at, we want you to keep your level of activity, if not improve it. And we know that exercise can help you maintain your function. Maybe Jen, you want to say something else besides that?
No, I was going to say the same thing, that I think it can take a lot longer to see improvements with ataxia. So I think that that's an important thing. You really have to persevere and keep at it. But along those same lines, I find from a research perspective, sometimes people really like to have stuff measured as quantitatively as possible, because sometimes you might only have like, I'm going to use strength because it's an easier example, but let's say you've only increased your leg strength by like 2 pounds of resistance. That might not yet show up in your ability to walk faster, but maybe, at least you would know that you're starting to make progress towards it. And so then it's easier to keep at it. So maybe for balance, if someone measures, how many seconds you can stand with your feet together before you lose your balance, then you can see in 6 weeks that you can do it, instead of for 4 seconds, you can do it for 6 seconds. And that might not translate to something that you can see yet in your life, but it's worth keeping at it, because if you could get to 8 or 10 seconds, then you might actually see that you're walking faster or doing something different. So I think that's another thing to consider. I also don't think you need to have a PT that specifically knows about ataxia, but I would encourage you to share like the information that we provided in this talk with your PT that you select, and also about the exercise studies that are out there, because I don't think that everyone always knows that people with ataxia can improve their balance or improve their walking. And so just having, sharing that information can help a lot. And then I know Jen and myself are pretty accessible by email and phone. If you wanted to share with your local physical therapist our information, they could contact us if they wanted something specific, if they need some general ideas about things for ataxia. But I think any PT knows the basics of what we do very well, and so they should be able to make adjustments as you need in order to.
And just to tag on what you're saying, Jen, I'll email Lori a copy of the articles that, some of the key articles, including Jen's exercise study and the German study and the systematic review, which just highlights the value of rehab in people with ataxia, and that can be good info to provide to your local therapist.
And then just while we've been talking, there were a few more comments and questions. So about recumbent bikes and about aquatic therapy. So a number of people really like bikes that either recline or that allow you to use your hands and your arms and your legs. And I think that those are really good alternatives. You don't have to worry about losing your balance. So you can work on just your cardiovascular strength and your strength overall, which can make a big difference. And then also somebody said that doing aquatic therapy also really helped with their fatigue level. And I think both of those exercises, one of the good things to think of is just that you really don't have to worry about your balance and you don't have to worry about falling. And so you can get the benefits of exercise from that, which I think is huge.
And then that, as we were saying before, by having, good endurance, then you can tolerate those other exercises, the balance exercises, a little bit more successfully.
And somebody wanted to know how they would participate in a study for the role of exercise. So currently in our lab, we don't have one going at the moment, but I would anticipate at some point in the future we will. All clinical trials now are listed on clinicaltrials.gov. So I would encourage you to search there for ongoing studies that might be available near you or around that you might be able to choose from. And researchers are good about posting when they're recruiting subjects and looking for people that would be interested. So we appreciate any time that you're interested in considering being part of a study. Okay, somebody wanted to know about leg cramps at night, if there's something that they could do about that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Within your control is, nutrition, hydration, not overdoing it during the day. You've heard a lot about eating bananas or, potassium, and that there's many sources of potassium that can help you to a certain extent. There's lots of fruits and vegetables. But then, do seek advice from your doctor also, because they can have some strategies to help you manage that at night. Jen, do you have any other thoughts?
No, I was going to say that too. There's just a number of different causes and things that can be. So between your care team, as Jen always refers, I think that's the important place to start for that. I see Lori's up, so maybe we're getting to the end of our time. It's been really nice to be here with you.
Yeah,
we sure are. Thank you both for all that information and advice you shared. This has been a great webinar. Thanks so much. Any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the audience?
Keep moving.
Exactly.
Well said.
And set yourself up for success.
Absolutely. As mentioned, a recording of this webinar will be available, and we appreciate all of you so much for attending, and thanks so much to Jennifer Millar and Jennifer Keller for speaking today. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting us.
Hey, everyone. Take care and stay safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.